All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. As viewers know, I do a lot of videos focusing on the history of New Jersey underground music. I could not continue that series without welcoming my next guest, somebody with a great history in music and a variety of musical styles too, and some very interesting, colorful people along the way. So I'm really psyched to have this conversation finally. It's my great pleasure to welcome Mr. Keith Hartel. Keith, thanks for being here, man.
Oh, thank you for having me, Joel.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And first and foremost, I got to thank my agent for setting this up. So thank you, fuck you, Tommy Productions, for making yet another Jersey-centric video possible for me. I appreciate it, Tommy. Um, cool. So we got a lot to get into, man. You've got decades of music we can dive into, and we'll hit as much of these targets as possible. For those viewers who are new to Keith, Keith came up in the New Jersey hardcore scene of the early 80s, bands like Pleased Youth, Adrenalin O.D. Later went on to work with bands like the Nymphs, who we'll get into, Motel Shootout, True Love, fantastic power pop band that I'm listening to
Thank
a
you.
lot these days. Played with Richard Lloyd. I mean, you've got a very wide stretch of different experiences along the way. So let's kind of start with really ground zero for you. Are you a New Jersey native?
Yeah, I was born in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Okay, cool, cool. And when and how did music kind of light that bulb above your head?
Well, my parents were young. They were 21 when they had me. My father played in cover bands. Like that was his means of supporting the family until I was like I think he started trying to find his way out of it, when I was like 10, 11, 12, like so, but right around 1980 was kind of the cutoff. Like the last, stuff that he was learning was like, for his cover bands was stuff like the Cars and like Joe Jackson and Elvis Costello. Like that was his last era. But basically what that means though is like I grew up where, the 70s rock music in the house, it was a constant. It looked like that's what adults were into. So really what happened was like I was, and it's a thing where I didn't hear that much kids' music. I just heard my parents' music a lot. And then, like, at 8 years old, we saw the commercial for the Kiss Alive album, you know, and so, that's so this, summer 76 got into Kiss. And then at the same time, there was like my parents had got into David Bowie, but I kind of hooked into David Bowie too, off of my parents. And then, it was Queen, Aerosmith. Like I was passionately into these 70s rock bands as a kid. And then, so music was always like a big part of everything. But when I was 12 years old, we moved to Edison, New Jersey. And in this junior high school, the second year of junior high school, eighth grade, that was when MTV came out. So that's like starting to see these like videos like the Vapors or like Adam and the Ants. And so I was getting into this, and I already liked the American, like the Cars, Pretenders, or whatever, new wave. But I started getting interested in like stuff on being shown on MTV that was unusual. Like it wasn't FM radio stuff or not that much, but like a lot of new wave stuff. And then what happened was a high school friend of mine was this girl named Amy Gurowitz, and her older brother was named Mitch Gurowitz, and he was 7 years older, and he was like a omnivorous um, record collector dude who anything new wave, punk rock, British import, indie, like he comprehensively had everything. So first we're starting to get into these like new wave import records like early Depeche Mode, Human League, and then you're Adam and the Ants, and then from there, then start getting into like first and second generation punk rock. I mean, I guess the first like the Sex Pistols stuff was always in there, but then starting to getting into like the whatever GBH, Discharge kind of bands. And this was just like this girl's older brother who then I also became friends with, but he was just like making me tapes. And so it goes from like, new wave imports to more punk rock imports to then it becomes when and then when was it like Was Let's Barbecue released in 83 or 82? Sometime around like
83, I believe.
83. So like, I'm visiting the house after school, the family house, and this guy Mitch, he's like, check this out. This is a band from Union, New Jersey. And he puts on and then at the same time he's getting into this music, was also getting turned on to like Pat Duncan, of course. But also the guy that used to be on before him, do you remember the guy Paul Kavanaugh, the Paul Kavanaugh show on FMU?
That was way before my time, but I definitely know.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what it was like, because he was the guy that was on right before Pat Duncan, and he was a little more of like a personality kind of DJ. Like he was goofing around, he was funny on the air, he announced records. And Pat's thing was just like, it was like the FMU style, like all data, like it's all, like he played you this like very deep, arcane local music. But anyway, I've kind of jumped off on a few things there, but what I guess I'll throw in while I'm talking about this time of first getting, intense into becoming a connoisseur of alternate music and particular punk rock. At the same time, so I lived in Edison, and New Brunswick is 3 miles away, actually walkable, easily drivable. But in New Brunswick, you had the three record stores. You had Cheap Thrills, which was a big record store that was kind of a mixture of kind of a Crazy Eddie's thing, a lot of cutouts and stuff, and then a lot of cool records. But it was, like a big kind of record emporium. You know, kind of, I don't know how to describe it, like kind of like an indie record store, but like a Sam Goody style indie record store or something. And then there was Jim Babjack from the Smithereens had a record store, Flaming Groovies. So this guy Mitch, my friend's older brother, he was friends with them. And then there was one third record store called Music in a Different Kitchen that just specialized in imports. So when I'm first getting into this, the punk rock, imports, hardcore, all of it, then you have this place in New Brunswick, and you start going to the record stores, and then people in the record stores. That's how you learn about music. Um, so yeah, I mean, at the time, it's funny because you think about the way the internet is now, like everything is taken for granted because everything's like turning on a faucet of whatever thing you want. But like the amount of like full immersion, like pre-internet full immersion in like I'm getting the records, I'm listening to the radio, I'm going to shows, I'm talking to people that are telling me what to listen, I'm fanzines, like full immersion of just, like really just hungry for anything of this, punk rock, anything of the culture.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting. I had Mike from Buzzkill on recently.
Mm. Mm.
He was telling me similar to you discovering Pat Duncan's show and like recording live sets on, cassette tape back then. I had the
Yeah.
same experience almost a decade later. I was listening to Pat's show when I was like late grammar school into high school. And
Mm.
one of the first sort of Jersey centric records I got, aside from like the Misfit stuff, was
Yeah.
that Morning Noise Parasite split that Pat put out
Hmm.
early 90s. So it was kind of funny because Pat's always kind of been the guy, no matter what generation came up in those days.
Oh
He
yeah, yeah, yeah.
was
Yeah, well, a thing that was really what I really value about that era, like it was, is really lucky. Like it's, I mean, as far as I don't know, there had a lot of coincidences had to happen for me to be, ending up on stage in these bands, playing music, and a lot of what the first like that during that era, like there was one record that came out. It was a compilation album called "Hardcore Takes Over the Dirt Club." Have you heard of this thing? You know this thing?
Yes,
Okay.
I had Dave from TMA.
Oh yeah, yeah, Dave's. Yeah, okay, I know Dave. But so like I'll be listening to so there was FMU, but there's also WPRB, there's WRSU, and WRSU is of course Rutgers. But so there's song like "I'm in Love with Nancy Reagan" that was on these college radio stations, and then it's on the compilation, Dirt, Hardcore Takes Over the Dirt Club. And so like I'm getting that record, or if I'm listening to Pat Duncan and hearing like "Sand in the Face" for the first time, like the local bands, they and like my friend Mitch with the AOD record, it's kind of like local music, the local hardcore bands, it was equally as exciting. You know what I mean? Like they were like getting into the local stuff side by side with the whole like the international punk rock thing.
Mm.
But the way that, you know, on those hardcore shows, the way that the local music was blended with the other music, it seemed very important. It seemed significant that there was bands playing. I remember seeing, actually, because when I used to hang out in the Flaming Rubies record store, I remember seeing Dave in there and just like, you know, sheepishly, like I was like 14 or whatever, like approaching, was like, oh, you're the singer from TMA. Because by then I had seen TMA at the first hardcore show I ever saw.
Mm. Yeah, it's amazing. These records still kind of come out in the present tense, and there's that big TMA reissue that came out. There's a
Yeah.
oh, it's really cool to see because I entered it sort of late 80s, so I missed
Mhm.
that first half of the decade. Uh,
Yeah.
and doing this channel is cool because a lot of these cats were still around, and I can kind of play catch up doing things like this.
Yeah.
Um, was Pleased Youth really your first band out of the gate?
Actually, well, technically, they actually weren't. Technically, they're the first band I ever played out live with. But the first band, again, so we're going to keep on referencing this guy, Mitch Gurewitz, my high school friend's older brother. So, um, okay, so this is like when I get it into my head that I want to be in a band, you know, the way that happened was, and it might have been, it was like the second or third hardcore show I saw, but the first three hardcore shows I saw were in a place called Patrick's in New Brunswick. It's not the Patrick's that is currently in New Brunswick, it's a different Patrick's, but that's beside the point. So the Patrick's, I don't know if, like, were you a Court Tavern guy? Did you go to the Court Tavern at all?
Later, like way later.
Yeah. Well, like Patrick's was like another Court Tavern, but it was in the ghetto. But it was basically like, it was kind of the same crowd. It was the same, you know, live music kind of scene. So they had, it was Paul Decolator and Doug Visdom, or Sluggo, AKA. They started, you know, putting, you know, getting hardcore shows together. And then they started having the first all age shows. Like they got Patrick's and then later the Court Tavern to do all age shows. So there would be like an early show and a late show. So the first one was that I saw, and a lot of people like, because I know you talked to Cliff and Ivy too, right? So that's the show where I met Cliff for the first time. And it was like December 1983. It was the Circle Jerks at Patrick's, and the opening bands were TMA and are you familiar with the band Detention?
Oh, sure. Yeah, they've been on.
That's Oh, okay, great. Well, that was the two opening acts, and again, it was exciting because I was hearing Detention and TMA. I both was hearing them on, you know, WPRB and WRSU, and but that was the triple bill. And then the second show, it was the headliner was Kraut. I think the second one, the headline was one where the headliner was Kraut. And then the opening band, I can't remember what they were called, but there was a New Brunswick band called Raging Lamos. Have you ever heard of that band called the Raging Lamos?
I have. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So they were known for being like, if the Replacements weren't as disciplined kind of band, you know, like, you know, rock and roll style of rowdy rock and roll. But this guy, like, so these guys were younger, and I'm looking on the stage, and I'm just seeing the singer. I'm convinced this singer is not older than me. I'm just thinking, like, you know, so, you know, I'm 15 years old, and it's like, now, if that kid, I'm just looking at this kid on the stage, I'm going, like, if that kid's old enough to be on stage, I could be on stage. And then the other thing that, and my father, as I mentioned before, he's a musician. He was a bass player, to be specific, you know, so there was a bass, you know, that existed. And I'm watching Kraut, and I love Kraut. And I was watching the bass player and Kraut and just going, like, I'm pretty sure I could put that together. Like, I think I could do what that guy's doing. That looks like you know, because, you know, punk rock bass, root notes, you know, simple, straightforward, one string at a time. So I got a hold of my father's bass, and I got this friend, Mitch. He was helping me learn. My father was showing me some stuff, and then Mitch was showing me stuff. And, you know, so it was gradually since he played guitar, We ended up starting a band with a guy that we met at that particular show, and we were doing it as like a trio, and then we had got a singer. And then basically what happened was while we were rehearsing that band, I had become friends with Paul Decolator, and he asked me to sing in Pleased Youth when Dave Scott, the original singer, was leaving.
Right, right. And that was the lineup that did the Dangerous Choo Choo album.
That is correct. That is correct.
Yeah. And I've had Doug from Please Youth on. I've had Dave Scott on as well.
Yeah,
A little bit about the history in those days already, but what's kind of interesting about that era of Pleased Youth is yeah, I know just in the last couple of years they put out the demos with the
yeah,
and that was very much like that hard, fast, sort of hardcore
yeah.
big
The
in those
real
days.
stuff.
But it seems to me, sort of doing my archaeological digs back to like the mid 80s, a lot
Hmm.
a lot of those bands sort of slowed down a little bit. And it wasn't
Oh
just
yeah.
like SSD in Boston totally went hard rock, And
Yeah, sure.
certainly Pleased Youth by the time that record came out was kind of a different band than it was when it started.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I have a bad track record for joining bands and slowing them down, or it's a coincidence. But I actually I prefer to if I'm going to listen to one, I like to listen to the demos more. And it might be that actually, like I listened to the demos like as a fan, when they were just demos. But and I think, I mean, basically, what seemed like it happened is that I mean, I don't know. I mean, because we're talking about the New Jersey band specifically, but if you go through the whole thing of hardcore, so the bands that didn't slow down like broke up, right? Like for the most part, a Minor Threat breaks up and then they become like emo rock, or it becomes Fugazi, or Brian Baker ends up like in Junkyard, and then he ends up in Bad Religion, but like
Yeah.
so, whether the band they were in, or Brian Baker, I mean, even being more direct though, coming out of Minor Threat, Brian Baker makes Dag Nasty,
Right.
right? So it's kind of like everyone that was in thrash. So it was either like Slow Down, and what AOD and Pleased Youth were more into. Maybe Pleased Youth might have aspired to, in our way, in our minds, we might have been starting to think almost like a lot of 70s rock thoughts. But I mean, Doug had a more, he had a bigger musical background, like education wise, like he knew more, he had more variety, he had more depth, like he had more history in his music. So there was like psychedelic elements or whatever would come into Pleased Youth. AOD maybe was more kind of just like slowing down to like a classic pop punk
Mhm.
type of thing. But it was either that or go metal. Like that seemed like the two things that were going on. And in Adrenalin O.D specifically, because the tour that I was on with those guys that would be summer '87,
Mhm.
and so like that's really kind of coinciding with, I think that's like by the like when the Cro-Mags album finally comes out, DRI is kind of officially metal. And so AOD was very much aligned of the category of bands that went really fast and aggressive. And all the bands that went fast and aggressive were just kind of getting, staying fast and getting more metally for the most part, seemed to be the attack. And AOD, it was just like really, you had the audience that we had, that they had built, and you were just giving them something in the opposite direction of where they want to go. Like, and it wasn't like people were hating the slower material. It's just that they were really it's why, when you go to see AOD now, if you see, just if you see what their set is,
Yeah.
actually that there's the set that they do is, that's kind of it. Like it's the classic thrash stuff with a nice smattering of the, pop punk, but
Mhm.
it's I don't know. It's funny because I get hung up about it because it is a really weird thing where we felt like in the band, that we're trying to do more and more interesting music that maybe might be catchier in a more conventional way to the average person, and it's just the opposite of what people wish to have from a band like Adrenalin O.D.
Mm. So how did that transition for you happen from, Pleased You? Because I know there was a time you did the album with them,
Mhm.
Andy split, and then you ended up playing bass and singing in the band.
That's right. Yes,
And then fast forward a little bit, you're on, it's the third AOD record, Cruising with Elvis and Bigfoot's UFO.
that is right.
So how did the AOD connection come about?
Well, Jack couldn't tour. I had recently broken up Pleased Youth. I was, I guess, kind of having some kind of friction with Paul Decolator. I think in retrospect, I might have just resented that he moved to Philadelphia a lot. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But like it's definitely one of those things where like what was up my ass that I needed to get out of that band. But like I had left Pleased Youth and really like kind of right after well, there was one thing is I wanted to start my own band, I guess, and write all the songs or something. But but it was really random. Like right after I broke up Pleased Youth, I get a call and they're just like, hello, Keith. Because I obviously knew those guys from we were always playing with them all the time. Yeah, and they just said Jack couldn't tour because Jack had a job and a family and he couldn't leave his job for 2 months. So that's why, it's just because I could do the tour and Jack couldn't do the tour.
Yeah. And you
And
were
then
for like a year, right? Roughly a year.
I think it was exactly 9 months, and it was a jam-packed 9 months. It was like we did a summer tour, then we came back and recorded the album. A lot of the album was being hashed out and written on tour in classic rock band fashion, and and then I played with them for a while after that, and then I quit those guys and moved to LA.
Mhm. So before you moved to LA, because there's another Jersey to LA connection we'll get into later.
Yeah.
People who've read my writing and checked out what I do know that I pretty consistently and enthusiastically banged the drum for a band called the Nymphs. Uh,
Hmm.
my top 10 favorite bands. The Nymphs are in there. Put out one of the greatest rock albums of all time, in my opinion. So
Yes.
you moved to LA, but before you did that, was that when you hooked up with Inger Lorre and did the Nymphs?
That is a really hilarious story because so because I was explaining how like the AOD thing, like that a lot of why I left was kind of what I was describing to you, was just kind of like um I didn't see a future with AOD because this universal, the direction that the band wanted to go in, it wasn't like people weren't smelling what we were cooking on the one hand, and then there was like kind of an element. It was a funny thing where like because I'd had these one-on-one relationships with each guy in the band. And I swear to God, like maybe except for Paul, but I think that Bruce and Dave, like I'd be talking to them, they're both kind of like, yeah, this is kind of maybe run this course. I'm ready to make a move, or so, and they're just talking shit. But but the thing is, it's one of those things where you feel like you're talking to a couple other guys, like, yeah, I think I don't want to split. No, I want to split. I'm going to split. And then I quit, and everyone's like, what? Why'd you quit? But so I didn't have well, I had an idea about starting a band with a friend of mine, and it was exactly like what happened with Pleased Youth. Like I quit the band, then I kind of started my own thing, and then I get this call. What happened different this time was I so I'd quit AOD, and then I'd been working on my new band, and there were some ways that wasn't clicking or panning out, and I was I guess I was like 19 turning 20 at this point. And so I had this girlfriend that wanted to go to grad school at UCLA because if you go to LA and established residence, you go like for free or almost for free or something. But basically, it was like it was kind of like this. I was 20 years old, but it was just like a kind of new girlfriend. Very exciting part of the relationship, and it's just like she was desperate to move to LA, and I kind of felt like well, I should just, this a change of environment would be good. And I was way overconfident about things would click for me wherever I went, because I've been in Pleased Youth. I had a record out with Pleased Youth before I was graduated from high school. Like, the next summer I'm with AOD. It's like, oh, well, this is the next summer. Next summer I'm moving to LA. But what happened was, do you know of a guy named Brian Bruden?
I don't.
He was a big major New Brunswick scene guy. Are you familiar? You're familiar with WRSU, the
Yeah.
Rutgers radio station? Okay, he was a big WRSU guy. So like, but he was. So my girlfriend was good friends with him. I mean, everyone was, but my girlfriend was good friends with him. And so she's talking to him. It's like we're moving to LA, and he's like, "Oh, well, my friend Lorre is looking for her band is going to get a major label record deal, and they need a bass player ASAP." And then it was hilarious because Inger, well, it's kind of like remember you said before when we were talking, and then you said like then Inger like whirlwinded into my life and took over my weekend or my week or my whatever year month, but it got like that because it's like he gets, so this guy Brian gets us in touch, and then Inger's calling me. And this is, again, this is like the 80s. Like this is like you're on a landline, and it costs a lot of money. And it's just this long, like, oh, we're like long lost sibling. And Inger had that. I mean, I'm sure that's what you experienced with her with people. Inger had like she really knew how to connect with people, like really, make them feel people either make you feel special or make you feel like you understand each other. Both is nice too. But like she's playing me stuff over the phone. She's like, "What do you think of this?" And she's playing me The Highway, like the first demos of The Highway. She's playing me. This is the best song I've ever written. She's playing over the phone, and then she being her, like we have a plan to move out whenever we're moving out by the end of the summer. But she's like, "No, what about now? Why does it move out like at the end of the month?" So like I sell all my records. I get a bunch of money to get a plane ticket to, and the idea is like I have a van, but I'm going to fly out, and then I have a Fender Precision bass and a Rickenbacker bass, and then my plan is when I get there, I'm going to sell the Rickenbacker bass, and then I'll have money, and I'm going to be there for a month trying to get myself situated. This is an insane plan, like and because these are I've met no one in person. I've had talks with Inger over the phone. I've met no band members in person. She has not heard me play. No one has heard me play my instrument. No, so, but it's like, okay, I'm going to fly to LA. I don't know any of these people for 1 month and just get this thing going. And, yeah, so that's how that started.
And how long was your time in that early incarnation of the Nymphs?
Well, and I might add that early incarnation in the Nymphs was not even that early of an incarnation because they've been like, I mean, I don't know how many years her and well, like, do you know the guy Bobby Belltower, who that is?
I've heard the name around, yeah.
Well, basically, what it is, because this to me, this is the real Nymphs, is like this guy. He was the original rhythm guitar player, and she had with him like, and again, like Inger has this attachment style. If it can be kind of codependent, non-romantic yet codependent attachment style. She does on people sometimes. And but her and Bobby, they were like siblings, but he was like her co-writer, and he specifically it was more for the lyrics, getting the lyrics right even than the music. Like it was, she always knew how she wanted the music to go. But like, but basically, it's like that whole first Nymphs album. It's mostly that's her and Bobby is credited on the album on some things, but he's of course undercredited for political and the typical bad fuck everyone over rock and roll policies of inter band the abuse. But like it's basically like the Nymphs is like if Keith Richards quit right before Sticky Fingers came out, and he's got like 5 co-writing credits, but like some other guys on the record. But anyway, but he played with her out here in some other projects, and they moved out there. Like they went through a bunch of band members. Like it was one of those things. It's these 2 people that are trying to put a band together. So they had gradually like there's Alex and Jeff, who were in the band that ended up on the final record. So they had landed on those guys, and then Bobby was there from the beginning, and then there was me, and then after I quit and got replaced, Bobby was actually the last one to get replaced. But basically there's a certain sense I would argue that it's like the Nymphs without Bobby, and it was kind of illegitimate. It was kind of this other thing,
Mm.
even though it sounded exactly the same. It sounded exactly the same.
So we're talking timeline wise. This is like late 80s, 89.
Yeah. Here's what it would be is like so 86 in 86 that was my senior year of high school. The Pleased Youth album came out, and then summer 86 I went on tour with Pleased Youth.
Mm.
And then the next summer 87 I went on tour with Adrenalin O.D. And then summer 88 was when I moved out, and that's when I was first joined the Nymphs.
Okay, so it was definitely that early. Um, I don't want to say I have the answer to this question, but I'm curious, why didn't you stick it out with the Nymphs at that point?
Well, it's funny because it's like you can give the whole typical answers. Inger, every person that ever quit her, it's like if there's like a crazy person who is like terrorizes everyone in the band, if anyone ever quits the band, that's the reason. But I would say that it's like kind of like I was alluding to before, like like I was on stage sometimes playing pretty big shows by the time I was 16 years old. You know what I mean? Like by the time I'm on my way, out to LA at age 20, like I think I'm the shit. I don't gotta take shit from anyone. I got two albums out. I don't need, I played on more stages than this chick. Like, like and so like there was like a confrontation where it was like an argument that was stupid. But see, another thing is like, I was not always I could be indignant or like haughty or whatever. So like in other words, if I'm getting abused, instead of like just kind of go, no, leave me alone, I could also become obnoxious and I could say something that might make her mad on purpose. You never know if that could have happened. And whatever I did say did lead her to like she like angrily pour a bottle of water over my head at a band practice. And I was like, well, that's it. I will not be treated this way. And so I quit the band, and it's like I said, I mean, history shows. I don't know, man. I could have ended up dead if I stayed in that band. Like what that thing ended up becoming. But yeah, I don't. Basically, every time I quit a band, like I'm always giving you kind of the same like reason. Like I think I have better things that could happen for me than this, and every time it was. I think in retrospect, it was before it was warranted.
Mm, mm. We'll definitely circle back around to Anger because she kind of made
Yeah.
the appearance in your narrative. But what else did you do when you were out in LA post Nymphs?
I was not in LA post Nymphs. Here's what actually one thing I did do in LA, legit post Nymphs, was I started a band with Mike from TMA because he was living in Redondo Beach
Wow.
and he was living with a guy named they called him Johnny O. He had like I think a crazy Greek last name, and I can't remember his whole last name, but he was called Johnny O. And I don't remember if he was in TMA. He was in some New Brunswick bands, and then he ended up in those guys, Mike from TMA ended up having some hot shit band in California that I can't remember what they were called. But long story short, though, I had reconnected with some dudes I knew from Jersey that were in Redondo Beach, and we made a trio together until I decided it was time to come home.
Mm. And so you make your way back to Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Would this be the time of the beginning of Motel Shootout?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, the first version of Motel Shootout, because like, yeah, there were several Motel Shootouts, and it's just like whatever band I cooked up, I and I wasn't even the one that came up with the name. It was my friend came up with the name. Um, just randomly, it was like here would be a cool name. So every time I had a new band, I just always called it Motel Shootout. So
Right.
there you go.
And this is kind of my entry point to learning about the Jersey scene at that time. I was born in 77, so I missed a lot of it. But by
Hmm.
by 90, 91 especially, I'm out there, I'm reading the EC Rocker. I'm
Yeah.
about all these bands. So I'm reading about Motel Shootout and Bad Karma, um,
Yeah.
some of the stuff that was kind of happening in those days.
You're
Um,
reading Bob Macon? You reading Bob Macon's column, Making Waves?
yep, you bet.
Okay.
You bet. And he's still around. I just read something he wrote not too long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Godspeed was another band that I was really into. I had Tommy on, speaking of Bob Macon,
Mhm.
Bob wrote a lot
Yeah.
of guys. And so that's kind of my entry point. So that was
Yeah.
AOD had the Ishtar thing and it was kind of done with them at that point. So
Should have named it. They should have never. It's funny because, like, ironically calling the album Ishtar, and then, because I mean, well, you talked to Dave, so you've heard. I wasn't in the band at the time, but yeah, that nothing about that went smoothly at all, huh?
yeah, that's my understanding. I like that record. I know Paul
Me
Richards
too.
really
Me too.
likes that record.
Yeah.
But they had kind of signed off for a while. So it was like
Yeah.
it was you guys, like I said, Bad Karma,
Yeah.
on the Jersey Shore, Monster Magnet was happening, and there was a lot
Yeah.
of things for me as a young guy to kind of read about and learn about. And I remember Motel Shootout was getting around, like it was a name
Yeah.
kind of always out there. So how frequently were you guys hitting things in Jersey and New York? Because this was early 90s, there was a lot of things happening at that point in time.
Yeah. We didn't play like we played frequently. We didn't play very. Um, we didn't spread out that much. I think we might have played like a CB's matinee. I don't remember if we had New York City gigs though. We played Maxwell's. I mean, well, it depends actually which Motel Shootouts you mean, because when Inger, the version of Shootout with Inger was a New York City band. So,
Hmm.
but basically, like when you're talking about that EC Rocker era, it was like we played the Court Tavern, the Brighton Bar, which was Monster Magnet's haunt at that point. But did you know Jacko, the guy that booked it?
Oh yeah, I played there a
Yeah.
bunch of times a little
Oh, you
late.
played there. What
Yeah.
was your band called?
At that time, early 2000s, I had a band at the Jersey Shore called the Graveyard School.
Uh-huh.
And I was always in northern New Jersey when I lived in Jersey.
Yeah.
I had a band that sort of became a shore band. Uh,
Yeah.
we played with Jack or for Jack a lot. We did a lot of shows with like the Mad Daddies and Speed Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so Jack's thing at that time was like he was into this like strict 6 week rotation, like for any band that was like a regular band. So the thing is kind of like Jack would give you a call. Like that was the one club that would call you like a normal thing. Like other places, so if I get a call from, because I think some of the times when Motel Shootout was playing, it might have been Sluggo booking the Court Tavern for some of that.
That's
But,
about right.
you get a call when when someone drops out. Like normally, but Jacko was the only one that would just like really book you like that professional schedule. And then there was another thing was there was like those WHTG Wednesday nights at the Green Parrot. Did you ever know the club, the Green Parrot in Neptune, New Jersey? I
Um,
guess that might have been done or getting done by the time you were emerging. But like Neptune, New Jersey is like the shore. But have you ever heard of the radio station WHTG?
yes, yes.
Okay, so it was close to there. It was close to Eatontown, and WHTG, like the Green Parrot, was kind of like that was their promo place. That's their DJs would go and work there and stuff like that. But like it was a really kind of good, like slightly high end new wave type club. But that was like a good, like there was a lot of gigs that seemed like good gigs, and in a way, it's like yeah, that's the stuff that it could sap your motivation, because if you're playing a real regular, you might not reflect and like, okay, are we expanding the footprint?
So there comes a point, so you're out in Jersey doing Motel Shootout.
Mm,
The LA Nymphs thing, continues for a bit. That inevitably kind of crashes and burns. I know Inger comes back home because Inger's from Jersey. I don't know a lot of people know that, but she's obviously from Jersey.
Mhm.
So she comes back, and at some point, the two of you kind of reconnect, and she ends up fronting Motel Shootout for a bit, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's really funny to me how it happened. It's funny because the cosmic coincidences or whatever. But the first thing is that when I left the Nymphs in LA and all that, I didn't have a great attitude. You know what I mean about the whole ordeal. And the funny thing was, I was an early adopter, as many of the hardcore slash punk rock world was, of listening to the band Nirvana. So um, I'd already been into Bleach, and I'd seen him at Maxwell's, and then I had gotten a hold of a pre-release of Nevermind. But at one point, I had like a 90-minute cassette tape because they both came out at the same time. One side was Nevermind, and the other side was the first Nymphs record.
Hmm.
So I think by the time the first Nymphs record came out, it was like 3 years ago or something that I'd been in the band. It wasn't fresh. Nothing was fresh. Like the music wasn't fresh in my mind. But the thing is like, I don't know, when I was in the Nymphs, I was, fresh out of AOD, and I'm kind of into this like punk pop, power pop thing or whatever. But, a few years later, and starting to listen to the grunge and the fluid or whatever, or whatever the Seattle thing was starting to morph into, like more heaviness. Like when I heard that first Nymphs album, I was like, this is fucking great. And I had Nevermind and the first Nymphs album on a 90-minute cassette and just listened to them on my band, flipped it over, just back to back. And I liked both albums equally. Like I was obsessed with those albums. So I had already like really just been like, I appreciate, because Inger also, she has a dictatorial style of working. You know what I mean? Like she's very like, no, stop doing that. I need you to do that, like kind of thing. But you realize like she really had, the whole sound in her head. As a musician, like, maybe you've experienced this, but like, creativity has levels and songwriting has levels. And you could be great at a lot of different things, and you could be great at a lot of different parts of being creative. But the kind of person that really has in their head the whole how it's supposed to be, like what the vibe is, how it feels, what it sounds like. She was one of those people. So when I'm listening to this album, it's just like, yeah, she was a visionary. Like this stuff, it sounds better than ever to me. So I had become a fan. And then, so in the few years after that, remember the band? Do you remember the band Mars Needs Women?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, Mars Needs Women, because Ray, the drummer, he was a Motel Shootout drummer. He was in the first lineup of Motel Shootout, but we were close to those guys, Motel Shootout. So me and the guitar player, Mick Preston, we lived together in New Brunswick. And then Ted from Mars Needs Women and Sean also lived in New Brunswick. So what happens is Inger had come back to New Jersey, and she's putting a new thing together. And she just started trolling. She decided she's just going to troll clubs. She shows up at the Court Tavern with Andrew Weiss for some reason. Andrew Weiss, she had somehow shanghaied into, being somehow involved. Well, he ended up making the first demos that we did with her. So there's that. But like basically, like she saw a picture in the EC Rocker of Mars Needs Women. And then thought like Ted is a cute guy, cool looking guy. And he's a bass player. So she gets this guy, Ted. So so Ted, because he was close to me, like he knew all the lore. You know what I mean? Like he knew what he was getting into. So what happened was though, then Ted, like her guitar player flakes out. He pulls in my roommate Mick, while we still have this Motel Shootout. And Mick is now bringing demos, like really primitive demos that she made herself, and then demos that he worked on with her. And it's so primitive, and it's just like killing it. And I'm just like, I know how this music should sound. I would work on this music. If they're ever looking to get more people involved in this, just I put me in. And that's basically how it happened, because people fell out, and then Well, that little project became dysfunctional, and then basically got rebuilt with her with Motel Shootout. So that version of Motel Shootout that had Mick and my friend Jeff Jefferson, who ended up in the Swinging Neckbreakers after that, and a guy named Tony, the drummer, Tony DeLeo. So yeah, we had our own band, and then the idea was like we knew Inger was a psycho, but I had this brilliant idea that it's like, well, if we make sure that she has to take the whole band together, like that was my deal, like that, that was my bargaining chip, is like, if you want, I'll be involved, but it has to be my band. I want my whole band in. That's it. And then the idea was like, well, then if she goes crazy, we can still be our own band. And that is really, that was naive. That was not, it's like married couple can't survive, a marriage can't survive the death of a child. Like it's too traumatic.
So I would imagine that era, that second go around with Inger, ended in spectacularly crazy fashion. I would have to.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny because there's one level where I almost can't. Here's well, it ended horribly and brutally. Here's one of the funniest things though, because like someone like her, like it really is those kinds of fights where everything gets pushed to the maximum of like, and Richard can have this in his way too, but it's like whatever that psychology is, where you're going to fight with a person and you're just going out of your way to say things. You just want to be as mean, you want to be as cruel as possible. You want to say things that cannot be taken back or forgiven or whatever. Like, there might not be real actual such thing as that, but that's what they're going for. Just hateful. Like, so if we got anytime but it was like a dysfunctional marriage where like, you have, or a dysfunctional abusive marriage. We have these knockdown dragouts where you break up and then you get back together. But the most hilarious one was because during this era, like I said, me and my friend Mick, the guitar player, like we were roommates. And then I was working at a telemarketing job, which I don't know if you ever worked in telemarketing, but it's not a fun job. And it really was at a point though, was because, me and Mick lived together. So our house was like headquarters. So like if anything was going on with the band, like from her or from the management, a lot of times from her, it was just like, we were getting, the call, the incoming was all time. And it was like, it started to be like, if I was working a 4-hour shift, it's like these 4 hours, nothing can affect. Nothing can affect. So at one point we had some kind of shit. I think what happened was, this was the knockdown drag out was, we were driving her home to Point Pleasant, and then she was trying to manipulate the driver of the car to stop in like a Patterson or some shit to cop dope. Just like, it's really obnoxious. Because it's kind of like, this was like, she's getting a drive home from New Brunswick to Point Pleasant, and of course, no one's supposed to be doing heroin, but if you are, you're supposed to be sneaky, and you can't try to make the guy driving. But like, we had some kind of big, like, it was a big blowout fight driving her back to Point Pleasant, and it was one of these like hatred things where it's like, okay, I'm through with you, and then every time you had one of these fights with her, you'd be relieved if you thought it was really okay. This is it. Okay, finally. And this is hilarious because so me and my friend Mick both worked at the same telemarketing place, again in New Brunswick, so everything's walkable. And right after we have this huge crazy blowout, Mick shows up at work while and I meet him outside on the sidewalk. And he might have sent an emissary, because there's always people on the sidewalk taking smoke breaks. He might have sent someone upstairs to get me or something, to fetch me. So I come out to meet him, and he just goes like this. And he just like, this is like, he's saying this like he's telling you that someone was in a car accident and you're in our hospital. And this is how he says, he goes like, And the management, they got a call. Hole is playing Roseland. Courtney Love wants us to open the show, as a gesture of friendship to Inger. Now, and I don't know if you like, have like that on the back, the frenemy thing with her and Courtney, but it was really just like, we. If you could imagine that you hear this news that you're going to play, I mean, Courtney Love at this time, she's on the cover of Rolling Stone. She was the most famous woman. Like Hole was the most biggest thing going, and just to hear this news and be like, oh no, because you have to do it, but it's just like you want a simple life, like you think you're about to have the simple life. And then the thing that's beautiful about that, because again, we had a knockdown drag out, like, just a vicious, ugly, ugly fight the night before. And then, so like this information comes, so my friend Nick could visit me at work. And then later, we're home in our apartment that night. There's a knock at the door. All right. So we were in a bro apartment. So, people could come rolling in anytime. It was like that kind of, it was like Seinfeld or whatever. Kramer was always walking in. But there's a knock at the door. And it's like midnight or something. When you open the door, and Inger just smashes a bottle of wine, like on her front porch, like smashes it, batters, right? And it's just like, and she's got this evil sidekick friend with her. And then she goes, "Happy New Year, shitheads." And then she comes in, and this is a time when we're all, I mean, we're doing a lot of weed and beer. And so like me and Mick aren't being invaded by, we're not sober at the time that she's doing this, but like, so she comes in and we just angrily just smoke pot and drink wine, and she just insults us until she falls asleep. And that was the reunion. And colorful character.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important too, from my perspective, certainly, we don't just kind of leave it as, she was crazy. Next topic. I want to make the point that with Inger, I got to know her pretty well the last year of her life.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
reviewed her album Gloryland. It was my album of the year in 2023. And then here comes Christmas Eve, and who blows into my inbox and thus my entire life for a few months? Inger Lloyd.
Yeah.
Um, and yes, there are legends. You talk to certain people, that name is mentioned, and they
Yeah.
perhaps shiver a little bit. But I personally, just my own perspective, I want to kind of leave it as she was also an absolute fucking sweetheart. And
Oh, well, yeah. I should actually say something about that, because that's important. That is important what you're saying, because it's like I said, like I went on to do like, 'cause that there was, first I had been in the Nymphs, this thing, I'm just describing this era. I was with her in at least like two other completely discrete different projects after that. And the thing is, well, all right, so here's she started going out with my brother, right? So like, she became like a I've hung out with Inger and my mom at the same time a lot. If what I mean? Like she was in the family at one point, and creatively, like artistically with her, we were on the same page. And then there is whatever that mental illness thing is, and like Richard Lloyd has it, and like whatever amount I have it or whatever. But like say, you know, there's a susceptibility to these kinds of like mystical or kind of Eastern thought philosophy. How the biggest psychos in the world are the people that get into like meditating and Eastern thought and whatever these like self-calming like ancient wisdom philosophies. Like she was that kind of person, as was I. But like in other words, like so she, on the one hand she's a total psycho, but on the other hand, like I've never I'm not well suited to just for society as a regular guy either. We looked at things a lot the same way. It's just that there was behaviors, there's things going on that wouldn't hit me. But no, Inger, honest to God, like that in my whole life of like any friendship with a female, the woman that I was really like legit best friends with no kind of romantic potential or sexual tension or anyone having a crush on each other. Like the real female friendship I've had in my entire life. And the way I got back in touch with her, it was the same thing, like where that, like once Facebook came in, one night I got really drunk and I don't know if I'd heard if I heard the Nymphs again or something reason, or if I just had this thought because I was drunk and sentimental, nostalgic. But like I drunk messaged her just to be like, you're fucking great and you're so, you're a genius, you're creative, like love your music. I was on her. And it's funny because and then the next morning I woke up and it was really like as a sober, like wake up the next day, like, oh my God, I drunk messaged Inger. What have I done? Was that a good idea? I don't know. And of course it turned out that was the best possible thing I could have done. It meant a lot to her. It meant a lot to me for her to hear that. And and that was when it was established. We were in good terms ever since. We were in touch ever since. She befriended my wife over Facebook. And so I value that. It means a lot to me that we were on good terms at the end, because she was really important to me, very important person in my life, very important person as an artist to work with, and a real one of a kind lady.
That's sure as shit, Keith. Sure as shit. I mean, I don't do it too often because, I was in touch with her a lot, prior, not too long before she had passed. And I'm not going to share any of the contents of those conversations on a podcast, but I don't have to tell you what those conversations were like. We give each other a knowing nod here. But they're beautiful to go through now and then, because like the random audio clips and capital letter, lowercase letter, capital letter.
Yeah. Like she has this like that. I mean, that's what you love about her, because it's kind of like someone who it just is relentlessly expressing themselves, and like her way, like because just noticing it from like just seeing her on Facebook, but just like the way that she writes with the mixture of the strategic use of caps that seems like it's a lot, but no, she means it. And it's like, this is her personality. Like I feel her coming. This feels like her. I feel like I'm a little nervous. I'm excited. I'm interested. A little nervous, but yeah.
And like, I'd get the notification. I'd be here at the home office. I'm like, oh, time to strap myself in.
Yeah.
It could be a picture of her dog. It could be, this epic journey. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be amazing. And I need to stop whatever I'm doing and give my full attention, because I will be better for it after the fact. That's always kind of how it was. And I think artistically, she left on an extraordinary high. That Gloryland album is gorgeous.
Yeah. Well, you know what? One of her things is, I mean, there's stereotypes about like, someone that they have an on and off again struggle with drugs, and I have no idea what was going on with her, for the last, since the year 2000 or whatever. So, but there was always like something coming up, like, because she was, I was occasionally still getting messages about like being roped into like, they want to come out to LA, and like there's some points when she was kind of like seeing if I might come out and help her work on the record, which wasn't realistic. But like it would be like I don't think it's about whether or not you're doing drugs when you have that kind of thing. She seems like someone like someone like a Kevin Shields, from My Bloody Valentine, not from Detention, but like this kind of perfectionism, like where she has the vision of it and some kind of built-in thing, that's just going to stop her from ever getting it done, because it's just like, I've been around her enough. I know how much stuff she wrote, you know what I mean, that never came out. It's like, if you look at the entire body of work that she's released for, how long, over that much time, it's not much. But she was cranking stuff out like any, kind of Robert Pollard guided by voices, I have a brilliant little idea every day kind of thing. Like she could have done a lot more. And but we do have what she did.
Yeah, yeah, thank God for that. So anybody who's watching this who hasn't heard Gloryland by Inger Lorre, I would get that record. It's not a record you listen to every day when you're doing laundry around the house. You kind of have to set
Yeah.
time for that record because it will fuck you up. Uh,
Nighttime album, the nighttime record.
oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I'm a big Marianne Faithfull fan. I think that record was her break,
Oh,
man.
you should. You know what's funny? My wife does a tribute to Marianne Faithfull. We've done Broken English. I play with my wife, but
Huh?
I like Broken English. We've done that entire album with Barry Reynolds in the band. Like she's befriended Barry Reynolds. But
Kidding.
yeah, we can talk about that later.
Yeah, that's all.
That was
I'm huge into Marianne, I I I,
yeah,
I have a certain magnetic pull to certain types of female personalities, and Marianne was definitely up my street, as was our dearly departed Inger. Um,
yeah,
so I kind of get it, as
yeah.
much as one can, and yeah, she Inger was going to come on this podcast, and we tried a couple times to the point where I'm logged in waiting for her to come on and she never signed in. Then I would get a message shortly thereafter, so my hair's not done, whatever it
Yeah.
was. And I think it really came down to, in retrospect, I think she said what she wanted to say with that last record. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
that's really my impression of it. So again, check it out, people. It's extraordinary work, and I'll just say, until we chat again, Inger, rest in peace.
Indeed. Amen.
And kind of moving on in a little more positive direction. I know, your story moves on. You had some interesting things um, in the years that followed. One being a great band I've recently kind of dove into, True Love.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, which to my ears is kind of like great power pop, on the lines of like a Big Star. Definitely some Cheap Trick in there from what I can gather. So that would have been kind of like more late 90s, early 2000s for you, right?
Yeah, yeah. That was yeah, I think that our first rehearsal ever was like first week of 98.
98. Excellent.
Yeah.
Um, how long was that run for you guys? Because I know there's songs on YouTube and stuff I've been diving into. How many albums was that?
That was it. That was 4 albums.
Mhm.
And yeah, we and oh, what else is there to say? There, yeah, 4 albums. The answer is 4 albums. And I'm trying to remember. I think that we broke up around. We broke up um, 2000, maybe 2008, 2010. It's blurry.
So a pretty decent run, all things
Oh
considered.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We played for a long time.
Excellent. And how active were you as far as, doing the clubs and going to different cities and things along those lines?
Not dissimilar to the Motel Shootout story, like where we played kind of a lot. We traveled a little more, like we, played, like Philadelphia or in Boston. We played New York City a lot,
Mhm.
but like it's still like we stayed regional. Like we never went on a real tour or anything. We played, Maxwell's pretty regular, the Court Tavern, um, the usual suspects.
Mm.
Even we even played the Brighton Bar.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I was bouncing to LA and back during those years, so I kind of missed it the first time around, but diving into it a lot recently, I'm really loving it, man. A great band with
Oh, thank you.
and based on kind of our earlier conversation about the hardcore bands changing, it makes perfect sense to me that you'd end up in a band like that, considering.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's funny because basically, like when I was touring with AOD, like I don't know. It's funny. It seems like that like era. Like I don't know how much this was constant or how much it was then. but like that tour, like summer '87, Cheap Trick was like the number one thing that everyone listened to. Like, I don't know, there was I think that I remember like there was a trend, like Red Cross kind of had this thing where, hardcore bands started getting back into '70s rock. And, like as I said in like my earlier, I was, brought up in '70s rock. So like for me, that's natural. But then again, that's generational. It's natural for the whole, Generation X cohort. But yeah, well, anyway, Cheap Trick was kind of like that was what you would aspire to, because it's like it's like punk rock, but it's classic rock, but it's funny. Like, you know what I mean? Like it had a lot of little, it's vaguely new wave, like, but just pure, very, very pure. Um, Very rock, like, unambiguously rock, unambiguously pop. I don't know. There's something
Very,
about it.
yeah, definitely, definitely. I'll definitely be diving into that stuff more. It really sort of just got me from the first note, and I love bands like that. You know what I mean? So I'm digging what I'm hearing, man. I'm looking
Well,
for
thank you.
listening to the discography and getting up to speed on things. And I know, and we talked a little bit before we started recording, um, one of my all-time favorite people to interview, and I've interviewed hundreds of people over the years, but if there's ever, I've interviewed him 3 times. If there's
Yeah.
ever a chance for a fourth, I will drop whatever I'm doing and I'm there. Richard Lloyd from television.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
kind of bring up Richard because you were Richard's bass player for a time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I this is one of the best stories ever, as far as like how that starts. Um, so before True Love started, I was playing with the guitar player Tom Beaujour, and he's the guy that we ended up starting True Love together. I was playing with him in a different project. He was like a new friend. And do you know this thing called the Music Building on 8th Avenue, like kind of across the street from Port Authority? So it's like 12 floors with like 36, rehearsal rooms or something like that. And, and it's an iconic building to the New York City history of every kind of rock band. Strokes started in there. I auditioned for the New York Dolls in there. It's, but anyway, so me and Tom were rehearsing there. And so I had, well, I was also, because I was a bass player, but I was also a guitar player. During the Motel Shootout eras, I was like rhythm guitar player.
Mhm.
And I had started getting into, whenever I was trying to start my own band, I always wanted to play rhythm guitar because I wanted to, write songs and sing, because I was a singing, a writing guy. Um, but I studied, I'd worked on learning how to play lead guitar and stuff. And I'd spent a long time, like, specifically the song Days, like learning like the song, the solo,
Mhm.
because it's not a fast solo. It's very melodic, it's one of those things where it's like maybe I could figure this out. But around the same time that I'm actually listening to television records and trying to pick out and it was specifically Richard's parts that I'm looking to. One day I'm getting out of band rehearsal, and it's like where the elevators are, there's like a flyer, where you rip off the little phone number tabs at the bottom. And it's just like, Richard Lloyd, ex television, and Matthew Sweet is giving guitar lessons. And I was not looking for guitar lessons, but I did it was a no brainer. I picked, took off the number, just went home, and when I lived in Jersey City at the time, called them immediately. So I started as a student.
Mhm.
And then, so my friend Tom Beaujour, now Tom's also a writer. He was a writer for Guitar World. And then what he's done most recently is, if you know of the book about hair metal, Nothing But a Good Time,
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
that's his book. He wrote the book.
Oh,
And
wow.
like, and then he co-wrote it with that other guy, Richard Beanstalk. But like, and then if you saw the Paramount thing, but this is who that is. But at this time, he also worked for Guitar World, and then so he starts taking lessons with Richard. But then his relationship with Richard is a little, maybe Richard's a little nice to the guy from Guitar World. I mean, Tom is a very likable, cool guy who's a really good guitar player. Easy, that was the kind of guy you would like as a student. But Richard eventually, so then we start the band True Love, and Richard actually come to see us. And then at one point, he just decides, like, okay, I want to try you guys as my backup band. So, and that was Ray Cubian from Mars Needs Women was the drummer of True Love. So that was the first way that we played with him. Is he initially, it was like with Inger, like he just, life is very repetitive, man. But he came into our rehearsals, and so then we were his band, and I think we played like 3 gigs with him. And then I wouldn't use the word he ghosted us, but it was a thing where, like, we'd done a few gigs with him, and then he was doing some stuff with television after that. And he hadn't done, what it was television hadn't reunited in a really long time. Like, it was in the early, it was like 2001, or no, maybe like 2001 or 2. Like, it couldn't have been 2001 because I don't think it was that close after 9/11. So maybe it was 2002.
I saw television in 2003 at
Okay, Urban Plaza. They did that. I think that they did that. They definitely did that 2 years in a row. And I don't remember if they did it 3 years in a row. But anyway, whenever they did it, though, like, it was the first reunion in a long time. So, and we had just been playing. And I think that we played with Richard 1 gig after the first time I saw him play with television. But then we stopped hearing from him. And then it was like one of these things, like being a dude that a chick breaks up with you or ghosts you. And then you find out there's some other dude. Because, like, then I'm in a conversation at this club in Jersey City, and someone's telling me how their friend's band is this band called the Blondes, and they're backing up Richard Lloyd. And, no one had told me. And then sometime around then, had stopped taking lessons with him, guitar lessons. And then what happened was, I'm getting mixed up, sir. I'm getting mixed up. But when I started teaching guitar, I was taking lessons from him. So there was one point when I was taking guitar lessons with him, and then he starts saying, like, how he has an urge to go out and play Jimi Hendrix covers. And now at this time, I'm just thinking to myself, like, I just want to tell him, like, I still have a bass, I still have a bass. I still have my bass, like, I'm taking guitar. I have a bass. I still have bass, So, but I didn't say anything because I was like, he knows that I would want to play with him again if there's an opening on bass. So he did ask me to end up playing with him again. And then that is what restarted, that was me and him and 2 other dudes. Mm-hmm. Starts there.
And you're on his Hendrix covers album.
Yes, I am on the covers album. Yes.
Jamie Nevert's story. Jamie Nevert's.
Yes. Jamie Nevert's story. Yes.
And that's a whole tale too about this guy Velvet Turner, who was his buddy, who knew tricks and.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about that is, did you ever go back and look at any, like, Velvet Turner he's in a minimum of 3. But like, Richard tells you, okay, this is my friend that knew Hendrix and blah, 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 my best friend in high school and stuff. And, like, it's like you believe him, but it also sounds kind of fantastical. But then you go see, like, that Jimi Hendrix movie that came out in like 71 or whatever. He was in that. Like, he was in, like, there's a Band of Gypsies documentary. He's in that. Mm. There's a Guitar World put out a, like, how to play Electric Ladyland. He's in that. Like, so it's funny because it turns out there's a lot of, like, public record of this guy talking about Hendrix is very well backs up Richard's stories.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about Richard, because, as I said before we started recording, I can sit back and listen to his 30-minute answer to a question, and it's going to go in 50 different directions. And part of you thinks there's no way this is actually part of reality. And then you realize it is. He's just one of those guys who seems to have had this extraordinary history of being in the right place at the right time, plus being a talented story writer, I mean, a storyteller and writer, actually,
Yeah.
to kind of put it all together. He's a fascinating guy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the most interesting thing about him is because I ended up being a guitar teacher, um, as a, and that was my strategy for not having to have a what they call regular job.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, if you're talking about the coincidences that Richard had, right? So my coincidence is like in order for me to become a guitar teacher, which did, that's been the case since 2001. It's a very important. That was very important to the way that my life ended up in my personal being able to enjoy it or be have some satisfaction. Is that and if Richard Lloyd, specifically Richard Lloyd, only him, if he hadn't had that, that flyer up, and then the one other thing was I took piano lessons from a Juilliard, um, grad piano teacher who kind of pushed me into doing guitar lessons, as a strategy to, like I said, become a teacher and stuff. But like Richard, like he has a entire he has a entire methodology of how he teaches guitar. Did you ever look at any of his guitar teaching content? Um, it was like a lot of it appeared in Guitar World magazine. He had a column, and then there's also corresponding videos, and you can find them on YouTube. But he is kind of like, almost like formally self-taught guitar player almost.
Hmm.
Like there's some way kind of way like he invented his entire methodology for teaching and understanding guitar. And the funny thing is in these, many years being a guitar teacher, I've looked at all the stuff that's out there as far as how people approach it. And he has a completely unique way of doing it where it's kind of like, on the one hand, you have all the information about music theory that you could absorb, that you could learn, but he has a way that he understands the logic of it and then how it specifically works on guitar,
Hmm.
that it's this like just completely, it's complete. It's like a total methodology for doing every aspect of music on the guitar and how the patterns play out on guitar and why they work that way. And and I don't know like how much he invented that way of teaching because of like, he was teaching to get extra bucks, that's why he became a guitar teacher, I assume. But I mean, that is a guy, like if a guy was ever meant to be like his personality, like was like, this guy has got to be teaching. Yeah, for sure. I mean, he was an incredible teacher. And then with Richard, because I was saying before how with Inger, there was that kind of the taste for the esoteric.
Hmm.
So there was one phase where when I was still working a corporate job in the 90s, late 90s, so this is when I'm first taking lessons with Richard and probably when I'm first in the band True Love, early True Love era, at least. And I was at work at a job where it was like the show Office Space, or the movie Office Space, or the show The Office, where everyone's just sitting at a computer in a low energy environment, killing time. So, I was always like looking up, interviews and stuff. And I'm looking up these old Robert Fripp interviews from like, the late 70s, like when he was in New York. And he starts talking about like, well, he makes one thing where it's like at one point, he says, at one point I had a plan to try to get television to reform with myself as third guitar player. So I go to my next lesson with Richard, and I'm just like, yeah, I was reading these Robert Fripp interviews, and he said some interesting stuff. And then Richard goes like this. He goes, well, Robert and I have interests in common outside of music. And I said, well, what? Like, I know he's really into Gurdjieff. And Richard was like, oh, what do you know about Gurdjieff? And, I'd done some cursory reading. But Richard he actually fully brought me into the actual Gurdjieff Foundation cult as it exists in New York City to this day. And I don't know how familiar you are with that whole world, but that's well, let's call it's a mystery. It's like it's a weird thing to describe it. It's like it's because I would call it a cult as a joke, but it doesn't have any cult like. It doesn't have any coercions. It doesn't have any try to get you quit. It doesn't have to have any taking your money. Like it doesn't do any of that stuff. But it's kind of like something between like a yoga philosophy and group therapy, some kind of blend there. But then again, but that does tie in with the thing, like that was like a lot of the me and Richard connection. Again, is that same like that impulse towards the esoteric, and that's always like, you know, you you don't feel at home in the world. I think in some sense, if you're drawn to that,
Mm. Mm.
like it's a whole thing of like, here's like life doesn't make sense because it's wrong on purpose. Like that's kind of the premise of a Gurdjieff type way of looking at things.
Yeah. I think that comes through in his book, Richard's book, just the prevailing sentiment throughout it. Um, Richard's from somewhere else, and Richard is very aware that he's from somewhere else. And I think
Yeah.
the perceptions that he puts down on those pages were very interesting, because I think he knows very clearly that, like something doesn't fit quite right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, it's weird too because I will tell you the most insane story about Richard because, like, as far as like, because he is a guy, and like now on the one tour, like there was the first tour I went on with him, he really went crazy. Like, and I believe that he would actually tell you, well, I mean, well, whatever way you predict Richard, he'll do the opposite because he's contrarian. But like, let's say that like Richard, it's very public knowledge. He spent time in mental hospitals. Like, he's legit like different, you know. And he got like before he went on this tour, the way that he was starting to talk when we were going into it, he's almost saying like, I'm going to let myself become, crazy. Like he was starting to give these talks going like, because he had this whole idea that he's trying to like reignite a solo career and he needs a hook. And he's kind of like, he starts going like, Rocky Erickson can't hold a candle to my mental illness. Sid Barrett has nothing. Like his whole thing was like, yeah, you know how like the mystique of the mental illness, like rock stars, like I can do that really legit. Like that's basically kind of what he's saying. And it did become this kind of thing where, and again, I'm in the mystical cult world, the guru world, whatever that is, like a guru is supposed to have this like charisma aura that makes you feel something. Like it really felt like that entire tour for chunks of it, it felt like being on drugs. Like you felt like you were kind of half tripping just because like he had made everything seem not real the way you're used to real. It seemed, I don't know, there was something otherworldly. Like other energies are coming in. It's really, I hear myself saying these things. I sound ridiculous to myself, but that's all a big setup for this one tour. Because what we ended up doing was I had the great honor of for like about a year and a half, the band it was me and Richard and then Billy Thicka on drums. So, and that was it. We were playing as a trio. So, so this one tour, we do this show in Birmingham, Alabama. And it was hilarious because like when we went out to the Midwest, like it was like a real strongholds of television fans. When you go to the South, not so much. There's a kind of white people in the Midwest that is really into television, and it's a different kind of white people in the South. And but it's funny because you would have a thing like what happened in Birmingham, Alabama. There'll be like literally 10 or less people, but two of them have a copy of Marquee Moon and want autographs. So, it was a surreal, but it was like, it was a real weird night. Like, and then we're driving home late after the gig and we're in a van and we get to this. And then now Richard, of course, he could be, a real prima donna. And then, and then seemingly sometimes almost as if to just make everyone's life worse. Like he would just he could complain. Like a guy could complain a lot. He could tell you a lot of what he needed and what he needed to not have. So we're driving home, and then there's like this wide open space, this intersection, and it's like there is a massive SUV flipped over, like it is upside down. And you get out of the car. There's cars that had stopped, but there's not traffic, but there's people that had stopped. And it's that, like, if you've ever been in or at a car accident, that surreal feeling that gets in the air, again, it's kind of trippy. And then Richard, and his kid, his son, when he was 17, he was on the tour like as the roadie or t-shirt merch guy for this. So Richard just like without thinking, he jumps out of the car, stops the car, jumps out. He jumps on the side of the SUV wasn't upside down, it was on its side, right? It's on its side. He's opening the door. He's pulling this like 300-pound guy, and his kids start helping get this guy out of the seat. He's jumping onto a car accident and pulling a guy out of a fucking SUV that had fallen on its side. And then the car accident was such that this old Cadillac had been impaled on a fire hydrant. This was a death. So then after he's done pulling this guy out of the SUV, then he's at where this guy is dying in this car in the fire hydrant, holding his hand and speaking to him as he sees him outside of conscious life. And this is pretty fucked up, right? But this is someone like he, if you want to talk about things that reveal character, right? Like, what would you do if you were the guy in the situation? And it's just like, he saw some people in trouble in a fucked up car accident. And the argument for minding your own business when you see a fucked up car accident is pretty strong. There's a lot of safety issues. There's a lot of, are you supposed to do it legally issues? And just without a second thought, he's like the fucking, like emergency, treatment. Fucking odd. Really weird.
Wow. Wow. Well, that says a lot about him beyond his guitar solos, man.
He's all in. He's really all in.
Yeah. Interesting cat for sure. And responsible for some of the greatest records ever made. I mean, that's
absolutely
solo and otherwise. I think Alchemy's, in the same class as those first two television records for sure.
Richard had his line that he used to like to say where he goes like, it was a joke. It was a laugh line. He goes like, I made my third television album. It's called Alchemy. Tom made his third television album and called it Tom Verlaine. But to me, those two albums I think those two albums are kind of the equivalent of All Things Must Pass and Plastic Ono Band. You know what I mean? Like they're splitting off and doing their own thing, but they're both those things. Well, I think both of those things, definitely the Tom Verlaine album, clearly it had stuff that was meant to be television anyway. But yeah, I take both of those albums, I kind of put in that category of the essential television listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, more power to Richard Lloyd, one of those guys who still does it. And, hopefully he'll do it for a very long time. It's always the wish.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of fast forward a bit to what you're up to now. I know you mentioned you and your wife have a Marianne thing that you guys do. So tell me a bit more about that.
Well, that starts my wife. She's what you might have to begrudgingly categorize as a performance artist. But what it means is she's a singer and but acts. And so like the Marianne Faithfull show, she had her most successful thing was a Nico show.
Mm-hmm.
But what she'll do is, because he writes plays. So you end up with something that's like a play. Like with the Nico show, it's based on a famous interview, which I don't know if you're a Nico guy or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see that movie, the movie about Nico that they made a few years ago?
Somehow, some way that missed my radar.
Good. Well, it's no good. But the movie is based on, and it might have actually been taken from Tammy. That's Tammy Faye Starlight is her stage name, or Tammy Faye. But her show, what she did was it was based around this interview that Nico did in '86, a radio interview in Australia, where she just says all this wild shit. She just says the craziest shit. And so, this show was based around her doing Nico being interviewed by someone, and then the band plays, stuff throughout Nico's career, Velvet Underground through. And then with the Marianne Faithfull thing, in that case, she was just narrating it as Marianne Faithfull. But she has an entire written script, and Tammy is, because our actual connection, kind of how we first connected was deep, sick love for the Rolling Stones. And, we do the Rolling Stones shows too. But the Marianne Faithfull show, she'd be telling like, the stories from Marianne Faithfull, and she could do the voice and the attitude, the feeling. And, she's a very, research intensive, obsessive. Like she's studying videos, she's reading every book, she's looking for every weird fact or thing that can be thrown into say. And then what happened was, because the first version of the Marianne Faithfull show, we got Kevin Salem in it. And so this is like 2016 or 2015, 2015, maybe 2016. And Kevin Salem, though, it happened that he was just friends and occasionally worked with Barry Reynolds. So the next time we do it, he's just like, yeah, well, Barry Reynolds, would you like to be involved? So then Barry got involved in the Marianne shows, and that's just that was just hot shit playing with that guy, playing those songs with that guy. It's great.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, that's another, broken English is, um,
Yeah,
I think with Marianne, people get her, they don't. She's one of
yeah,
the artists, and I think the best artists are like this, where they don't speak to everybody, but they'll speak to the right people at the right time. I
yeah,
think Inger had that for sure. Marianne
yeah,
Faithfull had that. Nico definitely has that. Like these are
yeah.
not artists who are going to sell platinum records. Not that anybody does anymore anyway. But you know what I mean?
Oh, I know. Yeah,
They're not going to be those artists who are going to have an easy run at this. But when they do find the ability to produce something, it's going to be the shit that's going to knock out the right people at the right moment. And I'd much rather see a world with those artists than the
yeah,
one pumping out gold and platinum records every day.
yeah. Well, I think that's cool about that too. Is like what I noticed, because my main social media I'm on would normally be Twitter, and what I notice is that like younger people, like they hook into the cool stuff because, like, in other words, like the likelihood of a young person getting into Marianne Faithfull or Nico. I mean that's why the Nico revival thing is successful, outside of what Tammy's done with it. But it's like now, like these things are really getting appreciated by the people who need it. So, when you're talking about whatever that like self-selecting group is, it's multi-generational forever now in a way that it hadn't been before, which I think is a real you got to take your wins where you can get them in this mutating society that devalues everything that is good.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, all that said, bring us up to the present tense. What does the rest of your 2025 look like creatively and projects and things?
You'll never believe it. I'm going to England with Adrenalin O.D.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, yeah. So it's full circle. It's full circle.
Are you doing bass or guitar for that?
I'm doing guitar because what it is that because Bruce can't do it,
Right.
right? So yeah, yeah. So that's why. So I've become like now I'm like just an all-purpose. Like if anyone from AOD can't be in the band at some time for some reason, and I guess it's me. But
Is Jim's doing that too, right? Is he making it?
no,
No, okay.
no. And yeah, I just got a random call. Like I don't know what the exact story was, but I will say that I believe the way I think of AOD was like you had two factions in AOD, which is you had the adults, and that was Jack and Paul, and then you had the pothead goofballs who were fun, and
Mhm.
that's Dave and Bruce. And so when I got the message from Dave, and he's kind of like, yeah, I don't know if we're gonna go with Jim. Could you do it? Would you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, definitely. And he was just like, I can't be the only pot smoker in the band. And I think it was like the social feng shui would be too fucked up for Dave if there wasn't someone goofier than him, and that is my job. So I think my job is to be Dave's friend and to smoke pot with him, and I'll do it. I'll do it. I don't care.
Nice, nice. Well, more power to those guys. AOD never really goes away. You know what I mean? They're always going to be,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, well, it's funny too because and it's funny because I've played two other, I think exactly two other reunions with them,
Mhm.
unless there might have been three if I played with them twice at Bowery Electric. But like, there was like one year is like Jack like insisted he wouldn't play in New York City. He wouldn't drive into New York City to play. So Jack did like whatever the Jersey gigs were, and I just did the one at Bowery Electric. And then it was the following time. It was because Bruce couldn't do it, and then they were doing part of it with Jim. I think that yeah, they did a part of it with Jim and part with me. That was two sets. So it was one with Jack on bass and Jim on guitar. That was earlier stuff, and then the second half was me on bass and Jack on guitar. So in this one, I'm just going to be on guitar, which I have never played guitar in AOD before actually. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And it's wonderful to see those guys going out there and having that experience, you know. I mean, it's cool too, because we're talking, 45 years roughly, from
Yeah, yeah.
would have thought 45 years later, you guys would be trekking out to England to play, it's crazy.
Oh, I'm obsessed with thinking about that and how weird it is because I always just keep thinking that I teach guitar, so I'm always telling younger people about the way it used to be. But this memory I really hung up on is like 1978. I think is like when Some Girls is out, a
Mhm.
Rolling Stones album, and I remember there was some kind of Year in Rock special on television, and so this guy's got Some Girls playing, and he's like, it was some kind of awards premiere show, and he goes, "The Rolling Stones must deserve some kind of award for keeping it going for 15 years." And it was like the Rolling Stones to this day are
Right.
still who have been doing whatever they're doing for the longest time. And it's always unprecedented. But the thing that's craziest to me is like, so then I think of the Rolling Stones, like when they were touring Tattoo You, and everyone's like, this is really getting ridiculous. Look at these guys. And they're like 33 to 35 or whatever. Like they're in their like early to mid 30s. People are like, are you kidding me? This looks ridiculous. Look how old these people are. This is crazy. And then I remember when Keith Richards turned 50 and there was a full page of Rolling Stone, like Keith Richards turned 50. Like that wasn't supposed to fucking happen. And then so at the same time, it's like, so I'm in hardcore, right? So I joined Pleased Youth 85, and then I'm out of AOD by 88. That's like 3 years, very intense years of playing in this hardcore music scene. And definitely in terms of, whatever, my status in the scene I'm in. Like I'm in the underground hardcore New Jersey scene. First I'm in Pleased Youth, one of the bigger bands, then I'm in AOD, I'm in the biggest band. And, so that's definitely some like, I was the quarterback of the football team in high school kind of shit, because this was all when I was still a teenager. So it really is weird getting back with AOD because it's like, okay, now I'll be 57 by the time I'm embarking on this. And it's just like, you feel like, am I dead? Like, is this actually what the afterlife is like? Is just like, yeah, you just keep on doing like, you redo the parts of your life and they have a different energy, but it's eternity. Like this is the Nietzschean recurrence.
Right.
It blows my mind. It blows my mind. Like it blows, and of course, just that it's funny also that I'm not. It's funny that I'm the youngest guy in the band still. That's hilarious. And then it's hilarious that we're playing with bands that are older than us. In some cases.
I remember going back to the EC Rocker days. I remember in 1989, 90, I was
Yeah,
I was reading an interview with Keith Morris,
yeah, yeah,
the final Circle Jerks tour, 19.
yeah,
He's like, I'm 30, whatever. He's like, I'm too old for this punk rock stuff, And this is back the Circle Jerks had like their long hair and
yeah,
kind of like the combat record stuff. And he's
yeah.
like, I'm done with it, I can't do this anymore. That was 35 years ago, and they're playing,
Yes.
at Punk Rock Bowling. Keith is fronting Flag with Dez and those guys. And it's like, it's 35 years ago. You were complaining back then you were too old for it, it's
Well, you know what I think a lot of it is like because again, like the guitar teaching thing, like you get like dudes in their 30s that know about hardcore. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's like we were saying before about, you know, the self-selecting niche cult audience will keep on being reproduced. So I think, and this includes Adrenalin O.D goes in this, but certainly like the Circle Jerks or whatever. I think that Keith Morris in 1990, like, he doesn't predict a world where in 2025 the demand for Keith Morris
Right.
in some Black Flag tribute lineup like that's huge demand and as bigger than when it was current. Like, that's totally, who could have thought? Who'd have thought? But
Well, it's funny. I was watching a video of Patrick's, the New Brunswick actually from 1984, Agnostic Front.
yeah, yeah.
And Vinny, I mean, as long as Vinny Stigma's still alive and playing hardcore, nobody has any excuse not to do it because he's like almost 70, and he's still out touring. So
I didn't realize he was that much older. I guess that might have been something I knew when I was a kid. That's wild.
yeah, yeah, I mean, he was in his 30s then, or close to it when AM
Yeah,
around a long time, Vinny Stigma, but he's still
yeah.
playing Roger too, all those guys. So yeah, who knew hardcore would have legs?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what I think it is. I mean, well, now we're going to get really weird. But like, I believe in. Are you familiar with the concept of like stuck culture?
No.
It's this idea, and I think it holds up. Like the idea is that sometime in the '90s, like it could be kind of arbitrary where you put it, but I'd say like put it kind of post, after once the internet got invented. But like basically it's this idea that, all right, if you were in the 80s and you looked at what people dressed like in the 60s, what the styles were, or if you were in the 70s looking at the 50s, and it's like, or even the 70s looking at the 60s sometimes, like, whoa, the styles were so different. It's like people now, like whatever, that the hardcore punk rock uniform, whatever, the flannel shirt, holes in jeans, like Converse sneakers, like that stuff is just that's still common style. Like all the common styles that, like, because even the 90s, like the grunge thing was kind of almost going back to the 70s, like skipping over the 80s, the parachute pants or whatever, the 80s weirdness. But like that basically ever since the 90s, you don't like look back at how people looked 10 or 20 years ago and be like, oh, remember when everyone was doing that? Like it's everything is always all the times together. And then it seems like because before the internet, and then especially before iTunes, and then especially before YouTube, but like my thing is kind of like Radiohead, like something like Radiohead or like Coldplay, like stuff that came out in the late 90s is kind of like the last stuff that became like a famous band and then stayed famous, like a kind of Madison Square Garden level band forever, that everyone knew about. And then ever since then, like there's been the mass cultural thing doesn't happen the same way. And so like everyone's into some kind of a niche thing, but there's no mass thing. Like there's no modern equivalent of something like say like something like either like Lenny Kravitz or the Black Crowes getting big. Like there's nothing that gets big that way. Where kind of like everyone hears it, everyone's aware of it. Like there's nothing like there's nothing that pops up in the culture where everyone has to know about it.
Hmm.
And it seems like that has to do with it because it's like well, like, and so when we're into punk rock or underground music or whatever kind of niche you're into or whatever kind of cult you're in, cultural thing, like we were getting into it to be as an alternative to the the mainstream culture that's being rammed down your throat. And okay, well, I can like go to a special record store and listen to Husker Du and have my own thing going on instead of listening to what MTV has on. And there's no that impulse that I need to get away from the main thing to find my own thing. That's kind of over. Like everyone's just always finding their own thing, even if it happens to be really, really famous. And then it seems like anyone can be oblivious. Like, I guess if you're a certain amount young, you're not supposed to be oblivious to certain things, but like, being oblivious to very famous, huge things is Well, I mean, you have bands now. You have bands that there are bands that don't have a major record deal or management or major management that play Madison Square Garden. Like, and that's some band that you and I never heard of. We never heard of what this is called.
Right.
In the 70s, there's no one playing Madison Square Garden you never heard of. It's ridiculous.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it is interesting. I have noticed that phenomenon. I try to be kind of like the hip and happening journal guy, keeping track of things.
Yeah,
But the
yeah,
reality is, because I'm going to be 48 this year.
yeah,
So my tastes kind of swing towards what a 48-year-old will listen to, or even older.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, so
yeah,
I'll see ads on YouTube for some band, like, some techno things playing MSG to your point, and I'm like,
yeah,
what the fuck is that? You know?
yeah,
And
yeah,
the thing is, I think, and there are even punk bands and hardcore bands I'm seeing now. I'm like, and they're playing massive shows. Who the fuck are these people? But the thing is,
yeah,
it's supposed to be that way. Like, I shouldn't know what an 18-year-old is listening to right now in a lot of ways.
yeah,
And I think that's good because I think we went for a long time where it was just about the older stuff.
yeah.
It's kind of cool to see there are hardcore bands. I have a buddy, Drew Stone. He and I co-host his podcast sometimes, the New York Hardcore Pod.
Uh,
And
oh yeah.
he helps out with like the shows at Tompkins Square Park and at the
Mhm.
Bowery Electric, the Sunday matinees. And
Yeah,
he has these younger bands coming through. I'm like, who the hell is that? But that's awesome. The fact that there are bands out now who I have no idea about. It's like that's their music, man. It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
about another Misfits show, another, you know what I mean? It's like it can't just be that. I'm glad you're all still playing, of course, but there's gonna come a time. So let's have some new people come in and be a part of things. And I'm seeing that now, even though I'm not familiar with it. I'm so thrilled to see it's happening
yeah.
you know. And maybe 30 years from now, they'll be doing their shows in England. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Oh well, it's like we're talking about with the internet. Like, well, I mean, a lot of the bands I know, like as far as like up and coming bands, they do these like house tours and stuff. Like it's funny because because it's pretty easy to network with the internet
Right.
compared to no internet. But like when I see the logistics of like the younger bands, putting together the network for the house tours, I'm just like, I cannot believe we used to go across the country. You stop at a payphone. I hope the guy answers, and I hope he's good at directions. And how did we survive? Like there was no GPS. God, I can't even believe I survived.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I did plenty of shows driving to CBs without a GPS and didn't even know about parking garages back then. I'd park on the side of the street to play CBs and there'd be people, get the fuck out of here and snarling dog chained on a fence, ready to bite my head off, and I'm 19. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
totally like not in my neighborhood at all. So, I kind of miss that in a way too. I mean, I love the convenience of doing stuff like this. I mean,
yeah,
fantastic. I talk to people all over the world doing this, but part of me misses the more like you kind of had to find people in the phone book or, word of mouth, like what's happening in Connecticut? Who do I talk to out there? That sort of thing. I do kind of miss that.
yeah, yeah. You know what? It's because when I think about that kind of stuff, I definitely know that I can't separate how much because like what you're talking about, like finding things, finding people, making the effort to find something. Um, like well, as I've mentioned a couple times, like I teach guitar, right? So, when I'm growing up, for most kids that wanted to learn to play an instrument, like you almost had to go to war with your parents, or at least just getting their like disapproval, or I don't understand what you're trying to do, your weird haircut and your obnoxious cacophonous music, and that all meant a lot. And now like you know kids now are brought up, at least where I am in Hoboken, So Hoboken probably has a kind of a, this kind of cross section between a certain level of maybe a certain amount of hipsterism, and then the actual grown-ups that are raising kids in Hoboken are, they're doing good. But like, the kids are encouraged as if like, to be well-rounded. You learn to play, you learn to play guitar, and then if the kid is like, yeah, my dad's really into Nirvana. I mean, the kid, like your music that used to drive your parents nuts, these kids are saying their parents are into, and it's like they can get into it, um, but and I can even tell because I started teaching like 2001, and I can even tell a difference between then and now is like that. They used to be like you could still find kids that were really intensely into getting into music. So like the last like era of that I remember was like the last CDs that were people were buying, and I remember it distinctly as it was like Green Day, American Idiot, and then there was Chili Peppers Stadium Arcadium. I don't know how much later that was, but like those were the last ones when actually kids were bringing in, like high school kids were bringing in, this is the new album, and everyone's into the hot shit new thing. And then gradually over time, it becomes more diffused. And the kids, like, they might tell you they want to learn something, but they don't have this intensity of, they're not passionate about it. And then if, I'm a 56-year-old guy and they're like, oh, what do you think I should listen to? It's like, I can't imagine being a teenager. When I was a teenager, I mean, as a 56-year-old, what's your recommendations for what's cool? Like, so there's a thing, and I one of the popular analyses is that culturally, the spot that was music for us became video games, like as kind of like a lifestyle thing, because the kids like there's no longer trends. Like, so if the kids are coming in to learn music, like I'm teaching college kids that are just like legit just going into like The Cure and the first Clash album or whatever. Like it's totally random. Like there's no era preference. A lot of times it's hard to get a stylistic preference, and I can't help but just feel like, like say we were into punk, or I also went into school with kids that were seriously into metal. There was a whole metal thing that was like the below the surface import records, Johnny Z, Megaforce, Rock and Roll Heaven, that record store. You defined yourself. You were passionate about it, and that's a whole thing they don't have. And it's kind of like, on the one hand, you want to like, oh, that's a shame for them, but like maybe it's not. Maybe it's not a shame that I don't come across anyone who they don't seem as angry. Maybe their parents not disapproving of them and making them into little rebels. Maybe they're fine. Maybe it's okay if you have normal parents who encourage you and you could just explore music, but they definitely don't have the eye of the tiger.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm saying the ones I've seen, because I'm talking about like lessons. Like I'm not talking about the kids that are playing in the clubs or making shows. I'm not speaking for them, but
Yeah, I see what you mean. I just think it's a lot different. I have a 23-year-old stepson. So
oh, okay.
I kind of saw his generation grow up. And,
Uh,
you know, for me, I couldn't wait when I was 16 to get my driver's license to drive
yep,
pipeline on a Thursday night, you know,
yep,
or I couldn't wait to get to Coney Island High and CBGB's, right?
yeah,
But,
yeah, yeah,
kids now my age and older, even early 20
yeah,
somethings, I used to be concerned watching my stepson. I'm like, I was talking to my wife, like my wife at the time,
yeah,
he doesn't get out. Like he's not like getting in his car and going somewhere. She's like, he's talking to people all over the world all day.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yes, yes,
it didn't click to me like, oh, he's
yeah,
not
yeah,
just solitarily playing video games. He's like networking. And so it's just different, and I think
yeah, yeah,
it's kind of supposed to be that way. Like I said, we're not supposed to know who the hip new happening hardcore band is right now. We're not supposed to know. We're the fuddy-duddies.
oh yes, oh yes, oh indeed.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, man, nothing fuddy-duddy about the fact that you're still in there doing it in 2025. I love the fact you're back in AOD. All roads kind of lead back to AOD.
Yeah,
Other way.
yeah, yeah.
And I wish you well with that moving forward, man. I got to know, I knew Jack for a while.
Mhm.
Got to really know the other guys through doing this channel, and um, I love talking to people from the era I wasn't involved in. Um, Not as a participant. I've always kind of listened to those records as soon as I could.
Yeah.
But it's been great connecting with you and other people, and I really do appreciate Tommy's efforts to connect some of these dots for me on this channel. So I really appreciate.
Yeah, I'm glad he did.
Yeah, I'm really happy you came on, Keith. It's good
Oh, thank
talking.
you. Yeah, this was like therapeutic.
Excellent. Well, we can always do another session in the future.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to.
Excellent, man.